$1,000,000, will I buy you a house? I would buy you a house if I had a... Oh! Hi! How's it going? Alright, today we're going to work on skin appendages, things that we find in the skin. It includes all sorts of things like nail, sweat glands, sebaceous glands, hair follicles, and hair. Today we're only going to focus on the 2 different types of glands. Alright, here we go. There are 3 different types of glands, all under the main category of sudoriferous glands. Sudoriferous sounds like it's got the word odor in it. Odoriferous. So these are stinky glands. Basically, they are sweat glands, and the sweat glands are found pretty much all over the whole entire portion of your body, except for your nipples and certain parts of your genitalia. There are 3 different types of sudoriferous glands, depending on what specific cells they're made out of and what they secrete. First one is called an Eccrine gland. Second one is an Apocrine gland, which we talked about previously, and sebaceous glands. So I've got them color-coded, green, blue, orange, so it should make it easy for you to follow along as well. Excuse me. So we're going to start with eccrine glands, which are also merocrine glands. If you remember, merocrine glands are the most common type of gland that we find all over your body. And they are mostly found on the palms of your hands, the soles of your feet, and on your forehead. So these are your basically plain old regular everyday sweat glands. When you look at these glands underneath a microscope or a diagram, what you end up with is a gland with a single coiled tubular gland. So if this is the skin, it goes straight down and then there's like this big knot of tube, and that is the gland. And it opens up to a pore on the surface of the skin right here. Now the sweat that comes out of it is not just water. It's mostly water, but it also has salt, vitamin C, antibodies, metabolic waste, leftovers, and even lactic acid. And I put the word mosquitoes here because mosquitoes are drawn to or attracted to lactic acid. And so if there's lots of lactic acid in your sweat, then those mosquitoes are going to be like you and probably eat you. So some people tend to get chewed on more by mosquitoes than other people. You probably excrete more lactic acid than other people. Kind of weird. It is controlled by your autonomic nervous system. Your autonomic nervous system sounds like the word automatic, and that's kind of what it is. You have little to no control over it. It's completely automatic. So when you get nervous, you can't tell yourself not to sweat because it's controlled by the autonomic nervous system. The main job of these eccrine glands are to prevent overheating. So it acts as a It acts as maintaining homeostasis by whenever you get too hot, you start to sweat, and it's funny, it always usually starts at the forehead, kind of works its way down. So forehead, nose, neck, pits, back, all the way down. And it basically just helps keep you cool, and so you don't overheat. Although sometimes you sweat even if you're not hot. We call those cold sweats, not because you're cold, but but because it's not in a response to heat. So cold sweats usually nerves, tests, first dates, things like that. And those type of sweats usually begin on the palms of your hands, that's a T, your feet, your armpits, and then it spreads out from there. All right, here's some pictures kind of showing you what eccrine glands look like. Here's your typical one right here. Ignore that dude for right now. So you can see it's a big long tube, goes through all layers of the epidermis, and then it goes all the way down into the dermis. It's got a blood supply nearby it, so that way the cells are nourished from nutrients. And then if you remember, the areolar tissue around here is full of water, and so a lot of that water just kind of goes into the tubes to help make the secretion. And then it just sweats out. These guys are usually just located separate away from a hair. Now, if you'll notice that this other guy, the apocrine gland, that's not sweat. And so if it's attached to a hair, it's not sweat. If it's separate from a hair, it probably is sweat. Looking over here, we can see a cross-section of cells. of this gland. So if someone were to slice it right through the middle, this is what you would see. Here's the empty spots that collect the sweat, and so you can see it's pretty thick. These are stratified, stratified cuboidal cells, and these are the ones that make the sweat, and then they'll all collect out of a tube and go out the top. Apocrine sweat glands, you can see, are simple cuboidal, a lot more room in between, but we'll get to that in a minute. All right, next one, apocrine glands. We said from last unit that apocrine glands are mainly milk glands, and they are, but there's some other ones as well. So apocrine glands are usually confined to the axillary regions, so your armpits, and the anogenital. I don't think I need to define what that is. These are bigger glands. As we saw from the previous picture, the area where the secretion collects is much bigger than the previous one. So larger glands, and they open to hair follicles. So these guys, the secretion comes out with the hair, whereas the sweat glands, it comes out without the hair. The components of the secretions are the same as sweat, except for now we have proteins and fatty substances in there. And what they do is provide food for bacteria. So when you sweat, armpit sweat, not forehead sweat, but armpit sweat, it comes out odorless. But the bacteria get a hold of it, start chewing on it, and then their waste products are what make your pits stinky. And since we all have a specific flora of bacteria found on us, all of our sweat is slightly different. The stink is slightly different. That's why sometimes if you have a pile of dirty clothes, you can smell the shirt and know instantly who it belongs to, because each person's stink is as individual as your fingerprints. Although 10% of people are very lucky and they don't produce a stink. I don't know if it's they don't make as much proteins or fatty substances, or they have different bacteria on them, but they sweat and they cannot put on deodorant and you can't smell BO. It's crazy. All right, these types of glands usually start showing up at puberty, which is why right around puberty kids start stinking a little bit more and they have to start wearing deodorant. So like my 9-year-old, she can run and play and be all sweaty, but she doesn't stink. But a 12-year-old runs and plays, comes back sweaty. They stink. They need deodorant. All right. There are two different types of specialized apocrine glands. First one, ceruminous glands, and ceruminous, not ineus. Ceruminous glands and mammary glands. The ceruminous glands make the substance called serum or cerumen. You'll see it both ways. And basically all that is earwax. So the only place that we find ceruminous glands would be in your ears. So they are apocrine glands, but their job is to make earwax. So here's a picture over here of an earwax gland. Looks very similar to the apocrine gland that we saw in the previous one because it is an apocrine gland, and it is attached to a follicle, so the wax will come out where, you know, you have ear hairs in there. Sorry, my nose itches. I'm not picking my nose, I swear. My nose just like totally itches right now. Okay. And maybe it's all those little hair follicle bugs. They're crawling around inside of me. So they secrete the wax inside of here, and then it comes out with the hair follicle, and then you get earwax. And then we have mammary glands, which, as you know, secrete milk. And so as you can see, these guys are much, much bigger. There's the gland. Right here is the duct. And then here is where it comes out. So I used to think for the longest time that it was your nipple and then there was just one hole and the milk all came out of the hole. But it's actually not like that. It's the nipple, there's the areola, and there's a whole bunch of little holes. You won't see them right now because they really don't show up unless you're actively lactating, where your body is physically making milk. And then you can actually see these little holes that and each one of those holes leads to a duct, which leads to a gland. So however many glands you have, that's how many holes you have. Interesting. Guys don't have holes on their nipples. Okay, third type of gland is a sebaceous gland. It produces something called sebum. Sebum is just a fancy name for oil. So the sebaceous gland kind of has the word sebum in there. These are oil glands. They're found all over your body except for the palms of your hands, the soles of your feet, because if they were oily, things would become slippery and you would drop things a lot. They're usually pretty small, except for your head, specifically your hair, your neck, right here, and your upper chest, here, and in the back. And your face as well. It didn't say face, but face, I mean, we all know we have oily faces, so we know they're there. Okay, sebum is the oily secretion that bursts out of the cell. It's the fact that it bursts makes it a holocrine cell. And the secretion, since it's attached to the hair follicle, if here's the hair, there's the gland, and so it'll secrete directly on the hair, and that makes it nice and lubricated. So the more oil you make, the greasier your hair is. The less oil you make, the drier your hair is. So the whole point of the sebum is to soften and lubricate your hair. And, oh, and your skin too. And so that way you don't have super dry skin. But if you're one of those, you put lotion on and it's still dry, well, you probably just don't make as much sebum as everybody else does. Okay, here's some pictures. Here is the drawing to help you see what you're looking at. Here's the sebaceous gland. Looks like a little cluster of grapes attached onto the hair follicle. And then there's the secretion right there. That's lubricating the hair as it grows. Over here, the hair would have been right here, but it got plucked out. But you can see that the glands, there's 1, 2, 3, all connected to a single duct. And then the substance will come right out, joined up with the hair, and then come out and fill it up like that. Okay, what happens when my glands don't cooperate with me? You get problems. So problems with glands. You have whiteheads, which are just when the sebaceous gland, so there's my hair follicle, there's my gland, so it gets blocked up. And or it could be the follicle even can get blocked up. So all this is just stuck full of oil, dried up oil. So you get a whitehead. Blackheads, same exact thing. The only difference is that it is in contact with air, and so the air oxidizes it. Just like if you cut an apple and leave it out in the air too long, or an avocado, it changes color. There's nothing wrong with it, it just changes color because of the oxygen. And so blackheads are just oxidized whiteheads. We have acne, which is an inflammation. So now they have bacteria and they start to swell up and get really big and ugly and nasty. And then we have something called seborrhea, which is just too much sebum, too much oil. So you get these buildups of oily scales all over the head, and it can show up in other places. Head is the most likely place. So if you've ever heard of kids getting something called cradle cap, because usually babies get it, it's because their heads are overactive for their newly growing hair, and all the oil just cakes onto their head. It's like little scales. You can sit there and pick it off. The only problem is that the body says, oh, there's not enough oil, got to make more, and then your body goes into overdrive, making a little too much oil. Okay, you ready for the pictures? They're gross, they're nasty, here they come. Okay, starting over here, whiteheads, whiteheads, ooh, I don't know what that is over there, that's gross. Ugh. Okay, blackheads, ew, 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 ew. Acne, ew, 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 pop it. And this one right here, that's the seborrhea. So the little baby, you can see all these oily scale patches on there. So there's medication for it, and it just kind of helps slow down the production. But pretty much you got to wait for your body to catch up with your oil production. All right, that's it for today. There's your nasty oil glands. So let's kind of take a look back at what we need to know. So today, just these two guys. We'll learn nails, hair follicles, and hair later. So for today, we learned sudoriferous glands. There are 3 kinds. Eccrine, or your plain old regular sweat. These guys, stinky sweat. Stinky sweat, milk, and wax. And these guys, oil. Okay? So for each of these, just be able to tell me, like, where would you find them? What do they look like? What are they attached to? So like the Eccrine, how they're attached to a pore, whereas the Apocrine are attached to the hair, and the Sebaceous are also attached to the hair. So if they're not attached to a hair, you know you've got an Eccrine gland, and if they are, you've got Apocrine or Sebaceous. Brain fart. All right, what other things? The 2 types of Apocrine, ceruminous and mammary. And then for the Sebaceous, just know sebaceous gland, sebum, and stuff like that. All right, guys. Talk to you later. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I will see you on Monday. Bye-bye.